ברוכים הבאים to everybody. ערב שבת קודש, פרשת וארא, מקם ביד. שבת מברכים חודש שבט, הבא עלינו לטובה. Today's class graciously dedicated in loving memory of Abraham Alberto ben Sara Cohen, Don Alberto Fasratawil ben Sara, by his children, as well as by Mr. Albert Aides, Le'ilui Nishmat, his beloved mother, Nizha Bat Fortune, Alea Shalom, and as well by Ishaq and Sylvia Shina, blessing the children Daniel and wife Jen with Zera Haya Be'Kayama. They should be able, Be'ezat Hashem, to bring holy souls to the world. Amen.
Amen.
When we come to Perashat Vaerah, besides Perashat Vaerah having the 7 plagues, the 7 makot that we'll discuss in this week's Torah portion, but I'd like to concentrate perhaps in the opening statement or first 2 pesukim of the Perashah before we go to the regular scheduled learning for today. So the pasuk begins, pay attention to the names of Hashem mentioned in this pasuk. Vaydaber Elokim el Moshe, Vayomer elav, Ani Hashem, Ani Amonai. In this pasuk, we notice something which is not very common in the Torah. That in the same sentence, the Torah utilizes 2 different ways of speaking. One is Vaydaber. Vaydaber is a strong word of talking, of speaking, and Vayomer is a mild word. So to your wife, you should always speak Vayomer. If you want to preserve Shalom Bayit, you speak Vayomer, not Vaydaber. If you use Vaydaber, I'm going to get a phone call. Now, can she talk to you Vaydaber, or she should talk to you Vayomer? So if you want to know Hazak Baruch, he said whatever she wants is okay. You're smart man, you're smart man. Okay, but you have Hachamim that say no. She talks Vayomer, I talk Vayomer, she talks Vaydaber, I talk Vaydaber. That's a recipe for disaster. All right? Now, I think the ladies are happy after this opening statement. But this is one question. And the second one, automatically, when the Torah says Vaydaber, which is an order or speak in a strong, firm manner, right away the pasuk says Elokim, the name of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which is connected to judgment. That's the first half. The second half, Vayomer elav, Hashem spoke to Moshe, relax, Miami style, Vayomer, soft, kind, Ani Hashem, the name of God connected to compassion. Now, why did HaKadosh Baruch Hu spoke to Moshe in such a harsh way in the beginning of the Perashah? So for that, we need to go to last week's Perashah, when the Perashah finishes with a complaint. The Perashah Shemot finishes with a complaint of Moshe against God. What's the complaint? It says, why did you make it worse to the people? Why did you send me to represent you? Umeaz Batya el Paro, since I came to Paro to speak on your behalf, Vaerah la'am hazeh, it became worse to the Jewish people. Ve'aseh lo yisaldet amecha. Not only that there was no salvation, but actually became worse. This is the claim of Moshe Rabbeinu against Hashem. Let's clarify. Moshe has no claims against God in his godly relationship. It's pashut, Moshe Rabbeinu doesn't understand. You sent me to fulfill a mission. I accepted, thinking that I was doing something good, and instead of something good coming out, it became worse. Obviously, we'll answer this in a moment, but we see God's answer. God was very calm. Vayomer Hashem, God answers Moshe Rabbeinu, Moshe, relax. You're judging the movie just by 2 minutes of watching the movie. אתה תראה, you'll see what's going to happen. If you read between the lines, maybe I'll save this for some other time, but basically, according to our holy books, the Pasuk says, now you'll see what I'm going to do to Paro, but you will not see what's going to happen in the time of Yehoshua bin Nun, when the Jewish people need to conquer the land. So God says to Moshe, Moshe, you have to understand me. I have dual personality, God says. Sometimes I do judgment. Sometimes I deal with the situation in a very strict manner. But at the end of the day, Ani Hashem. Even my strong judgment is an act of compassion. Imagine yourself that a person needs to go through a medical procedure and the person is not happy at all. Why me? What did I do? What did I do? Minor procedure. And the doctor, after the procedure, says to the person, God must love you. Because by doing this procedure, we discover something undetectable, and by the time it could have been detected, would have been, Haz v'shalom, one-way ticket. And this is a great lesson in Emunah and in Avodat Hashem, that many times we have questions. Why this has to happen? And why this happened to me? But many times I think that this pasuk is teaching us, Ani Hashem. It says, believe me, what I'm doing is for your best interest, even though we don't understand it, which this is a similar explanation when it comes to the Shema. When we say Shema Israel, we say Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad. We say 3 times God's names. One name of compassion, one name of judgment, and then you don't know which one is it. Hashem Echad. So it says here the commentaries on the Perashah, and it says as follows: Ani Hashem. It says Ne'eman leshalem sachar tov lamitalechim lefanai. It says, you're asking me, why did I send you? God says, I send you on a mission that you will be compensated because you are my shaliach. That's all who you are. God moves the pieces of the puzzle, and many times God utilizes human messengers. Like you can send a package with Uber or Pony Express. So the Gemara writes, Megalgelim zechut al yedei zakai. It says God sends salvations and good things through good people. Also headaches come through people that are headaches by themselves. Megalgelim zechut al yedei zakai, behoba al yedei hayab. Like days, the Gemara also says, days of the calendar have certain blessings, and days of the calendars have certain challenges. For example, Tisha B'Av, 17 of Tammuz, Asara V'Tevet, Som Gedalia. The days of Ta'anit are usually connected to an unfortunate incident, with the exception of Ta'anit Esther, obviously. But the rest of the Ta'aniyot are days which historically, if you look at the calendar and you look at the historical events, and I do this usually weekly. I have something that I read at home, and it says, these are the historical events that happen on this and this day. Not only yortzites of Tzaddikim, that we usually mention yortzites of Tzaddikim, like last week we spoke about the Rambam and the Pituchei Chotam, and the other day we spoke about the Balatanya, and the other day we spoke about Rabbeinu Hari, Rabbi Moshe Cordovero, whichever your side of Tzaddikim happens and we have a relationship with, we speak about. But you'll be surprised how many historical events really happen throughout our history that we don't even have a clue about it, especially in Europe. How many decrees, how many gezerot were activated against our forefathers in different locations, different cities. So it says, the next pasuk, Vaerah el Abraham el Ishak bel Yaakov, and I reveal myself to Abraham, Ishak, and Yaakov. Rashi says, El Ha'abot, to the forefathers of Am Israel. And here comes the question, who doesn't know that Abraham, Ishak, and Yaakov are the founding fathers of the Jewish people? Ask any child in the audience, who are the founding fathers of Am Israel? Obvious answer is Abraham, Ishak, and Yaakov, because the Avot are Shelosha. There were more tzaddikim, like the Ushpizim, Moshe, Aharon, Yosef, David. You can add Shlomo HaMelech. You can add many tzaddikim. But at the end of the day, it's like the founding fathers of Am Israel, Abraham, Ishak, and Yaakov. And the question is, why Rashi tells me Avot? Who doesn't know that Abraham, Ishak, and Yaakov are the fathers of the Jewish people? So I believe I saw this in the Divrei Mordechai that says as follows, that what made Abraham, Ishak, and Yaakov to become the founding fathers of the Jewish people? Short answer, becoming the Avot. But that doesn't answer. So how did you become an Av? What, you apply? There was an application? There was a job description looking for Avot? No one wanted to become an Av of the Jewish people. You need to know this. Nobody wanted to step up to the plate and to become the founding father, because once you become the founding father, there is a huge responsibility on your shoulders. It's like you become the father of your child. Becoming a father is not only conceiving the child and supporting the child financially. That's 2 out of 3. You need to be a father. You need to raise your child. You need to educate your child. You need to make sure that whatever action your child sees you do, it's a good example, and not, God forbid, the opposite. But I think that there is a deeper lesson that we can learn from the great dream team of Am Israel, Abraham, Ishak, and Yaakov. Obviously, everyone contained everybody's midot of Abraham, Ishak, and Yaakov. What does it mean? I'll ask you a question. What was the great zechut of Abraham? What was the midah that Abraham worked on it to develop constantly? Which one was it? Hesed. This is how Abraham Avinu is known. That doesn't mean that Abraham Avinu didn't have the discipline of Ishak, and that doesn't mean that Abraham Avinu did not learn Torah like Yaakov. Of course he did all of the above, but his investment was in Hesed, Gemilut Hasadim. Ishak Avinu, a whole different ballgame. Limited Hesed perhaps, but more Avodah. Avodah is not limited to sacrifices. Avodah includes prayers. praying. What else Avodah includes? Self-control, discipline. To be Ovid Hashem, you need to have all of the above. This was the master of Ishak Avinu in Avodat Hashem. Then comes Yaakov Avinu. Which was Yaakov Avinu? For sure Tefillah, for sure Hesed. But what was the bulk of the Avodah of Yaakov? Torah learning. So the Devora Mordechai explains that every Yehudi needs to become Abraham, Ishak, and Yaakov. In your world, we're not looking for more founders of the Jewish people. We got plenty of founders, but we need to have membership in Am Israel that keeps the lights on. Support. You know, like synagogues require support, even though synagogue had original founding members. If you're interested, talk to me. We'll take care of you. Okay? But you see that we have, as soon as you come in, you have a board of members, of founders. Now, perhaps we need to bring a new list of founders because the years go by and changes do take place, etc. But you know what the Divrei Mordechai says? That a Yehudi, in order to be an ambassador of HaKadosh Baruch Hu in this world, he needs to become a father to his family. Forget about the world. It says you start with your family. Once you start with your family, now it becomes like a pyramid. Your marriage, your children, hopefully your grandchildren, the great-grandchildren, and it goes from generation to generation. Well, all this being said, it says an interesting pirush here from the great Bituche Chotam. It says as follows. It says, and I'm not going to explain this openly because it's very deep, too deep, so I'm going to close the book better. But I'm going to tell you one thing. Relax, don't touch it. It's too deep. It's going to make you dizzy. You can look at it. You know, like it's mukse. You can touch it, of course you can touch it. But it's too deep, too heavy. Too heavy. And if you don't understand the Shetevot, it's difficult to even to read it.
Kabbalah.
Halfway. Everything from a deeper perspective than the Peshat. So he explains as follows, that yes, God, Hashem, many times manifests himself in a way of judgment, harsh way. But you have to understand that even within that judgment, the compassion is there. It's difficult maybe to explain it more because he wrote it in such a beautiful way that it makes a lot of sense the way it's written. It says, and from the same hardship, the solution comes. Because Hashem does not give a hardship without having a solution most of the time.
We don't know it.
We don't know it. We don't see it. And that's why God says to Moshe, he says, Moshe, you thought that I'm dealing to the Jewish people in a harsh way? I'm tightening the belt. Yes, I am, God says. But it's only for success. Because if we're going to flip through the Pesukim of this week's Torah portion, what we are going to see, that the plague starts. As soon as the plague starts and the Makot are gradually moving towards the Perashah, we see the light at the end of the tunnel. We left Egypt in Pesach. Mm-hmm. But do you know when slavery stopped? 6 months before, Rosh Hashanah. when the Makkah number 5 came. And even during the Makkot, there was a week of Makkah, and there was 3 weeks break to the Egyptians to give a chance to the Egyptians to do Teshuvah. So during the time of the Makkot, the Jewish people had 1 week vacation. So we see that the Makkot, how challenging were in a certain extent, but it also brought a certain peace of mind and tranquility to the Jewish people. With all that being said, we're going to come back to a beautiful Zohar of today that I gave a class in the earlier minyan today. Very beautiful. It has to do with the importance of the Se'udot in Shabbat. We do this already. 1 second. Right here. The Zohar Kadosh discusses the importance of the Se'udot of Shabbat, which we all do this, hopefully. I'm sure everybody has Shabbat dinner. I'm sure everybody has Shabbat lunch. And I'm sure everybody does Se'udah Shilishit. The question is, with bread or without bread? With bread. You're a Saddiq, I know. You're a Saddiq, so you do it. But many people come Se'udah Shilishit. No, I'm full. I had a heavy lunch today. So we're going to learn from the Zohar of today something that the Gemara mentioned earlier in the week, that there are 3 benefits to the life of the person that those 3 Sa'udot on Shabbat. Number 1, spurs themselves from the birth pains of Mashiach, which probably what we are going through now are the birth pains of Mashiach's arrival for sure. Birth pains, dolor de parto. Before a lady gives birth, you have contracciones, right? Same thing before Mashiach comes, you have contractions. COVID, Omicron, and whatever Delta, and whatever, name is out there. I hope 3 is enough. I hope. But you know what? We just heard a few minutes ago that the Montreal tonight, right, is the last prayer in the synagogue tonight. Effective tomorrow morning, lockdown, right? Yes. 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 All right. We don't know. We hope for the best. Okay? Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam she'akol nihiyah v'baruch.
Amen.
All these decisions are a hit or miss. I don't know what's, but we hope and pray that Hashem has rahamim upon us. But this could be like in Misraim. We thought a year ago, right, that by now, Khalas should be gone back to normal. Yesterday I read that JetBlue alone canceled 1,500 flights due to the variant, nothing else. It has a side effect. And Delta and American Airlines and European flights. So there is a whole chaos and havoc going throughout the world. And we hope, even Israel, every other day you have a new halakha. Yes, quarantine, no quarantine. Yes, no. Hotel quarantine, hotel for not quarantine. Sure, if you go to Israel and they let you in, if they let you in, after all the protocols, you have to go straight to a hotel that you need to pay for it. 7 days, I think. Yes. So anyways, this is like the Makot. We're getting Dam, Sefardea, Kini, Ma'arov, Dever, Shahin, Barad, Arbe, Hoshech, Makat, Bechorot, which I heard the other day, okay, I think I'll save it for some other time. Let's concentrate in the learning, what does better. So it says the Zohar Kadosh the one of the key components that the Sa'udah of Shabbat must have. What's your menu for Shabbat? Bread, wine. Then you have fish, salads, main course, meat or chicken, dessert, nice. If there is room, dessert. The Gemara writes that there is always room for dessert. True, Afikoman.
The Gemara or you?
The Gemara says it. The Afikoman. The Afikoman in the night of Pesach is the dessert of the Sa'udah of Pesach. You cannot have fruits after the Afikoman. You need to have everything before. And the Afikoman is the final. Anyways, but it's true. There is always room for dessert. Okay? Anyways, so all that is beautiful. But it says the Zohar Kadosh that there is one more component that is important to have during the Sa'udah of Shabbat. You know what's the component it's called?
Shalom.
Simcha. Shalom for sure. That's why it says Shalom Aleichem. Simcha. Simche, as they say. Simche. Happiness. It says the Zohar Kadosh that there was a great Hacham, Rabbi Memuneh, that he will display a certain level of simcha every time he sat down to eat the Sa'udah of Shabbat. And then you may ask, Rabbi, I understand simcha in Yom Tov, in the holiday. It's a pasuk. Besamachta behagecha behaita asameach. Simcha, happiness, and Yom Tov are connected. But where do we see on Shabbat that there is the need of happiness? So the short answer is the pasuk in the Amidah that says, Ismach Moshe. Simcha. But that's okay. Actually on Shabbat, the pasuk says, Bekarata la Shabbat oneg. You have to call the day of the Shabbat a day of joy, a day of pleasure. That's not joy, it means pleasure. Oneg means Leit'aneg beta'anugim, as the song says. Barburim uslav bedagim. It's a song. Leit'aneg beta'anugim, to derive pleasure with pleasurable items that a person eats on Shabbat. Now, the Zohar Kadosh brings an interesting tradition by Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, which is found, I like to say, in most of the Siddurim. If we say it or not, that's a whole different ballgame. It is not a mandatory prayer, but it's an introductory prayer, which is Adkinu Se'udata Dimhemenuta Shelemata Hadvata De Malka Meshicha. This is found in the Siddur after Eshet Hayil. Before you actually make the Kiddush, it takes literally less than a minute to say it. Let me find it here as well. Yes, you'll find it in the Siddur after Eshet Hayil. Let me translate you what it says here. Atkinu se'udata. Let us fix or set up. Se'udata means the meal. What meal? Dimhemenuta. The meal of emunah. Shelemata hedvata. My happiness is complete. The Malka Meshkatisha, because I'm having a meal with God at this moment. That is the meaning of this paragraph. Atkinu Se'udata. Aramaic, yes, Aramaic. Now, what is the concept of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai? So the Zohar Kadosh explains, And it says as follows. You know, eating matzah in Pesach, the Zohar Kadosh calls matzah the bread of emunah. You eat matzah, right? You're injecting emunah in your heart. You eating the sukkah. It's called the sukkah, tzilta dimhemenuta, the shadow of emunah. You go into the sukkah, you go into the chambers of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Now it says, Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, you eat the seudah of Shabbat, is your weekly dosage of emunah. Why? Because the Shabbat Kodesh, the Shabbat at the end of the day is perhaps one of the most fundamental connectors with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. You can give $1,000 a day charity. Is that good?
Beautiful.
Unbelievable. But a person is not Shomer Shabbat. The connection is not there. You can honor your parents beautifully, which is a beautiful mitzvah. Giving tzedakah also. But it's not connecting with God. You do an act of kindness to help the needy because you don't like to see people suffer, so you help, Chazaku Baruch. You honor your parents, which is a biblical commandment, beautiful. But guess what? Honoring your parents and observing the Shabbat are next to each other in the Ten Commandments. Why? Short answer. Because honoring your parents is honoring Hashem directly, but honoring your parents has a limitation. There is a max. What is the maximum allowance to honor your parents? As long that they don't ask you to do something against the Torah. If God forbid a parent asks a son or daughter, please pick me up on Shabbat so I can go to the supermarket, you respectfully and tactfully must say, I'm sorry, I can take you to the supermarket on Friday, I can take you to the supermarket as soon as Shabbat is over, but during the Shabbat, I cannot break it. That's why they are connected. Ish imo be'aviv tira'u, be'et shabbatotai tishmoru. That's one pasuk. The other one in the Ten Commandments. Zachor et yom HaShabbat lekadesho. Remember the day of the Shabbat to sanctify it. Kaved et avicha ve'et imecha. Honor your parents. And why the Torah puts the mitzvah of honoring parents on the first tablets next to the commandments of Hashem? Because when you honor your parents, you are honoring God. You're not honoring your parents, you're not honoring God. Simple. And that's why when we say the word Shomer Shabbat, that a person observes the Shabbat, it's not a joke. If you want to be a Hazan, you need to be Shomer Shabbat. You want to read the Sefer, you need to be Shomer Shabbat. You want to be an Eid, you want to be a witness in a wedding. One of the basic criteria, besides that the witness needs to eat kasher and put on tefillin and observe family purity, if all of the above exist and Shomer Shabbat does not exist, Mavisir, he cannot be an Eid. Why? Because the Shabbat protocol is the bonding and the connection, or as I said earlier today, the umbilical cord that connects the Jewish people with the Kadosh Baruch Hu. So every time we welcome the Shabbat, we honor the Shabbat, we celebrate the Shabbat, we dress in honor of Shabbat. Remember that honoring Shabbat is not limited only to food. It's also how you dress in honor of Shabbat. That's why some people have garments for Shabbat. Shoes for Shabbat. Talet for Shabbat. Suit for Shabbat. You have to keep the same face. But you take a haircut, Yichvot Shabbat. It's my to-do list today. Because my hair is too long. Don't take it personal, please. Sure, going to the mikveh in honor of Shabbat. I'm trying to protect his identity. 2 people already asked me, Rabbi, okay. So I said, don't worry, he's a nice fellow from Mexico. Anyways, so again, Halakha even says, if a person doesn't have an extra pair of shoes for Shabbat, how do you do? Says, you know what? Polish the shoes. Or take a towel, take a rag, make right. In other words, we need to show, a preparation for Shabbat. And that's why preparations for Shabbat cannot take place in the last minute. There is a concept that a person is actually the one that welcomes the Shabbat instead of the Shabbat welcoming the person. The Zohar Kadosh writes and it says, Atkinu se'udata, the way it says, de malka kadisha. Imagine yourself, your wife asks you today, who is coming for dinner tonight? And you're going to answer her when you get home, God. God through the Shabbat, obviously. And that's why the next paragraph says, Atkinu se'udata de malka. Prepare the meal for the king. Malka in Aramaic, huh?
Wait.
No, Malka, no. Malka in Aramaic means king with Aleph. Malka in Hebrew with He means queens. But for me, it's the same thing. That's why you say, boy kala, Shabbat Malketa. The Shabbat represents, if I'm able to say such a thing, I hope it comes out the proper way, the female version of Hashem. Yes. It's not two separate entities. Hashem is Avinu, Malkenu. Multi-personality. Right. Avinu, Malkenu. Our Father, our King. That's why the Zohar Kadosh says that a person sits in the Sa'udot of the Shabbat, Borei Olam is your guest of honor. And when you have an honorary guest sitting by you in your home, in your table, what are you supposed to show your guest? What kind of face?
Happiness.
Chazaku Baruch. Chazaku Baruch. It says the Pelei Yoes in the topic of welcoming guests at home. It says, welcoming a guest in your home is comparable like welcoming Hashem's holy presence. Sure. We learned this from Abraham Avinu. But you know what else he says? Don't make the meal to your guest miserable. Now you may ask, who is going to do such a thing? You know what the Pelei Yoes says? When you invite a guest to your home, you sit down to eat with him, he's enjoying the delicious meal, and then suddenly for you, it became a therapy session. You open your heart, you tell them all your problems, all your headaches, all your challenges in life. It says, you know what that guest wants to do? He wants to leave. He wants to run away because he came tentatively for a nice meal, a happy meal. I don't mean McDonald's, a McDeal. Okay? No, as somebody say happy meal, McDonald's. Haz v'shalom. A happy meal with a nice face. So you may say, but hold on, Rabbi, it means that I cannot share with a friend my issues, my challenges, to look for an advice? Of course you can. And you should do it if necessary. But don't do it in the Shabbat table. Don't do it in the Shabbat meals. You need to talk about a situation. Separate. Separate. Do it in the weekday. Tell, listen, I need to sit down with you. Let's go for a quick snack. Let's go for lunch. Let's go for a coffee. I need your advice. Once you tell the person that, the person is mentally prepared for that kind of conversation. But if you invited someone for a meal and that's the topic of the conversation, guarantee you that nobody enjoyed the meal. One more thing, the Zohar Kadosh explains that many times people confuse between celebrating the Shabbat and observing the Shabbat. We know that it's the same, but it's not the same. Celebrating the Shabbat to the outside world, it means Shabbat dinner. Zehuze, or Friday night dinner, the way they call it. Tradition. That's beautiful that the family sits down and eats together. That's unbelievable. But that's not called observing Shabbat. Observing Shabbat, it means that a fellow observes to the best of their abilities the Shabbat. If it's praying with the minyan, learning Torah, making 3 sa'udot, dressing in honor of Shabbat. You know, sometimes, Baruch Hashem, there is a huge improvement in the way people come to the synagogues, thank God, especially on Shabbat and holidays. But sometimes you see people on Shabbat and you ask, Mehila, you came to the synagogue, not to Black Friday mall shopping spree. Weekday, we understand. But Shabbat, it's part of, you know, that in the early days, somebody wanted to implement that everybody who comes to the synagogue many years back must come in with a jacket on Shabbat and holidays. Yes, in the early days, to show the proper Kedushat Bet HaKnesset. And I'm going to speak about it because I've seen some people coming to the synagogue, you know, jeans is not the topic. I'm okay if they wear jeans. The problem is that sometimes they come with sandals, they come with shorts. No, Baruch Hashem, Shabbat they will tell the guy, go upstairs to the ladies section. The weekday, I'm saying. So the person needs to be sensitive when we come to the synagogue, that we're coming to the miniature Bet HaMikdash. We're coming to the house of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And that's one of the reasons why the Zohar Kadosh said a few weeks ago that observing the Shabbat is not only connected to the actions or the ceremonial aspect of Shabbat. It also includes how a person speaks on Shabbat, or what topics the person speaks about on Shabbat. What does it mean? We all know the answer, that to talk about business on Shabbat, you're not allowed to. Investment, business, transactions, all these things are not suitable for the Kedusha of the Shabbat. And the Zohar Kadosh brings a mashal. Imagine yourself, you invited a guest to your home for Shabbat meal. You serve the meal on the table, you serve the plate of the guest is sitting on the table, and you go to the Florida room to read the newspaper. How that guest is going to feel? Chazak u'baruch. It says the Zohar Kadosh, that is what happens when a person in the middle of the Shabbat meals discusses topics which are forbidden to talk on Shabbat. The guest says, I'm here. That means God, the Shekhinah, Shabbat Malketah. And that's why the Zohar says Shabbat is about what a person eats, how a person dresses, what the person does and doesn't do, and also how we speak on the day of Shabbat Kodesh. Okay, my good friends? I say Shabbat Shalom to everybody. I'm not sure if I said this in the beginning of the class, but Be'ezat Hashem, this Shabbat, we're going to announce the upcoming Rosh Chodesh Shevat. Be'ezat Hashem, this Shabbat Kodesh, will announce the Rosh Chodesh, which Be'ezat Hashem will be in the early part of this coming week. Have a good Shabbat, everybody. Shabbat Shalom, wherever you may be. And Tizkena Mitzvot to the generous sponsors of today's class. ברוך אדוני לעולם, אמן ואמן. רבי חנניה בן הקשיא אומר, רצה הקדוש ברוך הוא